I've always thought it'd be great to go away for Christmas, somewhere really picturesque. A beautiful snowy mountainside, rolling valleys as far as the eye can see, almost like the kind of thing you'd send on a postcard to someone. Somewhere in France, the Alps maybe. Yeah, I think that'd be absolutely fantastic one day. Unfortunately, we still live in pandemic times, so that wasn't going to happen this year. Instead, I decided the best thing to do would be a virtual Alp and cycling at threshold effort for about an hour. This Christmas Eve, I found myself home alone. With no wet bandits likely to visit my home anytime soon, I decided to find some activities to fill a bit of time and maybe do a little bit of exercise. Our tri-club coach Adam had organised an online meetup for a ride up Alpe du Zwift. Now, I've ridden it a few times before, so I figured this would be a good opportunity to benchmark myself on the climb, see where my fitness is, and also burn a load of calories before our traditional fish and chips on Christmas Eve night. Alpe du Zwift is a virtual recreation of the real-life Alpe d'Huez. It's based in the online world of Zwift in the Watopia course. The real-life Alpe d'Huez features 21 hairpin bends that go all the way up the side of the mountain. And to be fair, the Alpe du Zwift does a really good job of recreating these. I've never actually ridden Alpe d'Huez yet in real life, but anyone who has tells me that Zwift is a decent recreation of it. After you cross the start line, the UI on Zwift changes, and I think they've done a really nice job here, with each of the 21 bends representing a segment on the road. For each one, you can see how far you've got left to go on the segment, and then you can also see your average power and your average heart rate for that particular bit. You can still track your overall progress on the climb, either with this counting down on the right hand side of the screen showing you how far you've got left, and your time up at the top showing you how long it's taken you. The real-life Alpe d'Huez is 13.8 kilometres in length and gains 1,120 metres in height. The fastest recorded time for going up the 13.8 kilometre climb of Alpe d'Huez is held by Italian cyclist Marco Pantani, with a time of 36 minutes and 50 seconds in 1995. I think it's safe to say I won't be going anywhere near that anytime soon, either in real life or the virtual one. As you make your way up the mountain, you'll be keeping an eye on the gradient in the top right hand corner so that you know exactly why it is it hurts as much as it does. I think some of the earlier segments leading up to some of those first hairpin bends are some of the hardest. There's gradients here of like 11–12%, and I think it's really easy to go too hard too early and leave yourself struggling when you get nearer the top. In real life, Alpe d'Huez has a real connection to the Netherlands and is known as Dutch Mountain. That's quite possibly because 8 of the first 14 people to win stages of the Tour de France on Alpe d'Huez were from the country. That's replicated quite well in Zwift, and in particular you'll find that as you go around turn 7. In real life, turn 7 is known as Dutch Corner, and it's often been the scene of some fairly wild parties that run on for several days. Now, in total, it's thought that around about 350,000 people make their way to the mountain every year. And in particular, trips from the Netherlands can be incredibly popular, with coach companies going there for 2–3 days and taking a load of people there to just essentially have a good time. So as you make your way up around and past turn 7, make sure you wave to the Dutch tents that you'll see lined up on the side of the road. I mean, you won't see anybody hanging out in the middle of the road drinking Heineken, but you can imagine. As you get to the last 5 or 6 bends, this is the point where I think it gets really tough. The fatigue has really set in, and even though the gradient isn't that high on some of these segments, you really start to feel all that time that you've been working away. One thing that I think Zwift does really well is it recreates the gradient and the dropping gradient as you go around some of those hairpin bends. If you're really tight to the hairpin, the gradient does increase, but anytime that you're on the outside of the road, you can really notice it getting a little bit easier, which means you can just back off a little bit, catch your breath, and go again for the next segment. As in real life, all of the bends on the Alpe du Zwift are numbered from 1 to 21, but you tackle them in reverse order. So the very first bend that you'll do after crossing the start line is number 21, and the final bend that you'll take on is number 1. As you approach bend number 1, make sure you avoid the mistake that I made the first time I climbed up the mountain. I figured that was the end of the road, so I kind of went a little bit deeper than I probably should have going into bend number 1, only to then find that there's actually another 800 or so meters to go before the finish. If you've managed your effort well, you'll have something left in the tank for those final 800 meters, and you can really go for it to the finish line. By this point, you'll probably already have a really good idea of whether or not you're going to get a PB or that time you are hoping for on this occasion. So that can either be a real boost or it can be a real struggle mentally. On this particular occasion for me, I was hoping to come in under an hour, so by now I knew that probably wasn't going to happen. So it was a case of just finding what I had left in the tank and making sure I could get to the finish. After you cross the line, this kind of weird wheel of fortune pops up on the screen and you'll receive a gift from Zwift. Stick it in your garage, you might find some use for it later on. All that remains is to coast down to the finish, or use it as an opportunity to just spin your legs nice and easy for a recovery. In my opinion, it's climbs like Alpe du Zwift that make Zwift so good and such a viable training option. Now, where we live is a pretty flat part of the world in a pretty tiny country that doesn't have any kind of climbs of this length. So therefore, to be able to do something like this, to just basically fire up the turbo trainer, get in a conservatory and then go climbing for an hour, I think is a really good way of just building that fitness, maybe building some of that confidence in yourself to be able to do that kind of climbing, so that when you go and potentially do it in real life, it's not a complete unknown and you at least know that you've got a vague chance of being able to do it. Now obviously there's nothing quite like that kind of climbing in real life. There's a lot of other things that you don't gain from doing this on a turbo trainer. In particular, someone like me that has zero bike handling skills, learning to ride at very slow speeds but very high effort levels does take a bit of practice. But I think something like Alpe du Zwift is the next best option, and I think it's a really good fun way of building that fitness. The real life Alpe d'Huez, I actually need to